I'm Karen Fong, and I was the creative director of the main title sequence for Jack Ryan. In any main title, it's incredibly important to get the tone and the feeling right. You know, this is your portal into the show. I much rather think of metaphorical ways, symbolic ways of representing a character rather than taking it literally. And so our creative process began with just investigating everything that made up Jack Ryan. Many viewers are aware there's a whole Jack Ryan history and mythology through all the Tom Clancy books, the feature films. He is a very rich and layered character. There's a scene in the pilot where he's concentrating at his desk and he tosses a baseball back and forth. And to me, that's the perfect metaphor of Jack Ryan. It's all American, wholesome. It speaks of his sort of suburban background and kind of peaceful civilian life. But then there's another object, a hand grenade, that speaks to his life in the military and the violence and the trauma. Some interesting things started to happen, though, when we thought of the character in these dualities. You know, there's civilian Jack, and there's military Jack, there's stockbroker Jack, and there's CIA Jack. So we were getting more into his psychological self and trying to imagine what he would see with these sort of mundane objects. So there would be the overhead of Paris where they go into the first season, and those spokes of the boulevards reference the spokes of his bike that he uses to get to work. A row of planes at an aircraft graveyard, but that row of planes start to resemble the vertebrae of his back. Because after all, it was his back injury that had him leave the military. He'll be staring up on his bed at the ceiling fan, and he'll flash back to when he was a Marine. What we really want to do is find a system for all these pieces to come together and be more than the sum of its parts. What if we had this constantly updating visual database of who he was? And then we could do all kinds of fun things. We start with his racing skull. There's little glitches, and then you see the tip of the Washington Monument. It's this constantly updating database that sometimes even got kind of confused visually, so you would actually see explosion become autumn foliage of his East Coast life in the same image. And so ultimately, we combine those two ideas, duality with pattern recognition, to get the concept that we have in the final. I love to live in that space between analog and digital. So for instance, one of our more complicated shots was this ship. By the end of the shot, has seamlessly transitioned to the Marine ribbons that are on Jack's uniform. And so that would involve several things, like making those containers just the right width and lighting in CG, but putting them on footage of a ship so you get real waves and real wake. Maybe we have to work with the ratio of the shipping containers,
I think it's almost too perfect.
The mark of CG. But then our photographer took a picture of the uniform on one of our animators who was a stand-in, and took that element so we could match it up to the CG. So just in that one slice of the main title, you've got maybe 4 different kind of media being combined. Since Jack actually works at the CIA, I imagined that he had this dossier. What would be in those files? The papers, the visas, the surveillance photos. You know, so it's all these little ID numbers and all the stats and all the things like cycle, and all the Jack Ryans from all these things like all the way to the end. So it's like you really literally piece together his name at the end. Sometimes things don't even make sense till you're later in the season. And so what I really hope is that you'll get something different out of the title sequence with every viewing.